Hi, my name is Andrew Long. This is my screen recording for Module 2. So who am I? I'm Andrew Long. I'm a world history teacher at Reading Senior High School. If you look at the picture up on the top right, you will see a picture of the high school. They call it the Castle on the Hill due to its design. We're also called the Red Knights, so it's kind of fitting. It is the largest high school in Berks County and one of the largest high schools in Pennsylvania. I graduated from Millersville University in 2017, so I am back at Millersville to get my master's degree. Some things I like to do: I like to travel. I've been to 45 of the 50 states, and I've been to over 23 countries. I like to go to sporting events, so I'm a big Kansas basketball fan, so I've driven to Kansas and back in a weekend one time. I would not recommend doing that. It's a little much. But I also love learning about history. I think it's important. It tells about how we got where we are, and a lot of the issues that we look at today, we can look back through history and pinpoint a moment where these issues came from. One of my favorite images from history right here is Margaret Hamilton. That is the source code that took us to the moon. She's standing next to, that's how much it is. All right, so I find that image very interesting, just like I find history interesting. And that picture right there is my cat Goose. He is named Goose after the movie Captain Marvel because he looks just like the cat in the movie, whose name is Goose. He is very fat, and I love him a lot. So now, getting into the readings here, okay, my prior experiences with online learning. So as an online learner, I took several online courses at Millersville University. During the summer, a lot of them were just purely online. Now, I'm sympathetic to my students because I struggled with motivation myself during these courses. I found that it was difficult to log in and look at a screen and take a class. I would much rather be face-to-face, at least in my experience. And my mindset going through this past year was that if I had issue finding motivation for these courses and I was paying money for it, how could I get these kids to buy into this class if it's free and they're younger than I was when I was in college? So I kept that in mind while I designed my class as a teacher during the past year, because that was very important to me. I could sympathize with the students, understand what they're going through, and that's also partially why I wanted to take this course and take this major, so I could learn new ways to engage the students and use new tools to make the students enjoy the learning process. Now, starting in March 2020, my high school was fully virtual for over a year. So that's my online teaching experience. I was teaching from March up until this week, fully virtual. Okay, this week was the first regular school day since we shut down in 2020. We have not had kids back in the building except for a couple, about roughly 100 came back very, very late in May of this year. So for at least a full year, no one was in the building, and this is our first regular day. So I have gained a year of experience, and I've tried to grow as I went. Now, the skills and qualities in online teaching. Okay, some relevant skills laid out by Moskowitz that I can reflect on are as follows. All right, anticipation. All right, there are lots of different things that need anticipation, whether it's students' needs, any challenges we're going to face, and potential obstacles. The students' needs is a big thing because, like I said, engagement's difficult. All right, a lot of students, their laptop would die, so you had to make sure that you had stuff planned ahead of time. Okay, and potential obstacles. You had to find ways to get around that. I use an online textbook. One day, middle of a lesson, textbook just doesn't work. Okay, so I had to go find a new resource for the students to use that could still apply the same lesson and fit the objectives while finding an entire new resource to use. Okay, so you have to make sure that you can work around issues and anticipate those things. Communication, that is something that I think that I need to work on, and I like to develop more, because sometimes in a classroom you can see that look on a student's face when you communicate something to them and you know they didn't get it. But in an online class, at least for my students, we had an issue with students not turning cameras on. Okay. And so when I'd say something, you had to take it that they just understood what you were saying. You couldn't get that visual cue, which is so important in communication. So I'd like to work on that because communication is the keystone with which education is built, in my opinion. If you can't communicate the lesson or the outcomes or the objectives or what the students need to learn to the students, they're not going to succeed. They're not going to thrive. The content knowledge is something that I have developed, something that I enjoy. I love history. I am very passionate about it. I can remember back to my first year of teaching when all year I tried worksheets and all year I tried to do these things that just were boring for the kids and I never have engagement. And one of my favorite parts of history is wars. Okay, World War II. I love World War II. I find it so interesting, and you can pinpoint the issues we have today came from World War II. So I was doing a pair deck, right? And I was talking about World War II, and I was focusing and just kind of talking. I wasn't really looking at the class that much. And I looked up, and I had every single student's gaze right at me as I was talking about this. So the students could tell that I was passionate about it and that I knew a lot about this material because I would go on some tangents for about 5 minutes about random military operations and their effects and stuff like that, to the point that the students actually asked me if I could start a military history elective to teach them because they found it that interesting, just like I did. And then technology skills, this is kind of something that I developed and something I could still develop. Because in my opinion, you're never done learning technology because it changes. As soon as you get good at it, there's something new right on the horizon. So it's kind of a weird middle ground where it's both, where I developed it and it needs developed. I'm comfortable using technology. Once I'm familiar with a interface, I can use it very effectively, but there's always more you can learn. There's always more you can do and new ways you can use technology to help students learn. Now, the qualities for online teachers versus those that are face-to-face, okay? While Moskowitz mentioned some qualities that can differentiate from a face-to-face classroom, there are some qualities that are interchangeable. All right, flexibility. Flexibility you need as a teacher whether you're in an online classroom or a face-to-face classroom. I remember last year, of course, I was getting observed during that class period, and none of the links would work. The Google group wouldn't work. I couldn't do breakout rooms. I couldn't do anything. So I had to just scrap everything and come up with a brand new thing on the spot. Now, naturally, I was freaking out because I provided this lesson plan with all these details about exactly what I'm going to do and the resources I'm going to use to my administrator. And I had to just absolutely scrap it. And again, reach those same outcomes, reach that same lesson while using a completely different format. And I went into the meeting with the administrator freaking out, thinking this is going to be terrible, but she praised me for the flexibility I showed and how I didn't let these issues get in the way of things. And that's just a quality that all teachers need to have, in my opinion. We also need to have organization. I have seen some teachers' desks who are absolutely horrendous. There's papers everywhere. I have no idea how teachers would not lose their papers, how they could find anything. And this isn't judgment if you're one of those teachers. I know I prefer to keep my desk very clean, orderly, so I know exactly where everything's at. This is an interchangeable thing with online learning, okay? Organization is a huge part, okay, especially with the way you present information, okay? The organization of, for example, I used Google Classroom this last year, and keeping that organized and the stream efficient let the students know exactly what we were working on that day, exactly what they needed to do, and also the organization kept me up to date with everything that the students needed, okay? So those traits are something you need no matter what, as is passion. This might be the most important because I've long believed that a student can tell if a teacher doesn't have any passion immediately, okay? And if you don't have a passion, you're never going to reach the students. And in an online class where engagement can be at an all-time low, depending on how you go through things, that passion can shine through. That passion is extremely important because it lets the kids buy into what you're selling. It lets them listen to you and understand what you're trying to teach them. If you stand up there and you have no passion for what you're doing, you probably don't want to be there in the first place, and you're not going to give the kids what they need. Whether that's a face-to-face classroom or an online classroom, those qualities remain interchangeable. Okay. The role, however, changes significantly, and I kind of enjoyed this. With breakout rooms and stuff like that, I could become a facilitator now in the online classroom more than I was in the face-to-face. When I first started teaching, the face-to-face room, it was just one-to-one, right? It was no collaboration. It was, let me teach you this, you learn it. But with online learning, it kind of taught me to allow the students to gain their resources and learn kind of on their own. Allow them to learn how they want to learn, provide different means for the same outcome. And I could facilitate and push them in a direction, but if they wanted to get the information from a video or from a worksheet or from a project, they have these freedoms, and I could just push the content out and watch them learn. Obviously, you need to supervise them. You can't just say, here's the work, turn it in. But it kind of allowed me to break free of my previous mentality when it came to the teacher's role. And that's one of the most significant things, in my opinion, that there was a change. All right. The role changed significantly. And in my opinion, the role changes for the better. Now, of course, online teaching does not come without challenges. All right. Archambault lists a number of challenges with online teaching, and I want to reflect on a few that I consider to be the hardest. There's two. The first I consider the hardest is time. When it's physical paper that I can grade, I can just pick it up, scan, go through it, write a note, go on to the next paper. I found online teaching to be much more time-consuming than face-to-face teaching. For one thing, you need to have internet to be able to grade, right? And you got to open each thing up individually, and you got to go through the process of adding a comment, click to add a comment, and then resubmitting it. It's just in my opinion, it can be a clunky process which takes more time. However, I will say a positive is that kids can no longer say, oh, mister, I turned that in, and you can say, no, you didn't, because I can see right here you didn't, right? But the time aspect is a significant challenge. And from taking the materials and transcribing them into an online resource or finding all new resources, that's time consuming, right? So that, to me, was one of the biggest challenges for online teaching. The other is the content. I taught 3 years before we went online, and I finally, at the end of that third year, right in about February of 2020, before we shut down, I finally felt comfortable with my material. I finally was in a rhythm, and I could say, I'm going to teach this with this. I'm going to use this resource for this. I'm going to do this project for this. And then we went into the pandemic. We went into online learning, and the content was difficult for me to fit to online teaching. So I wasn't really comfortable at first last year trying to manipulate that content into what I needed it to be for the students. Now, looking at it now, I'd say that it is for the better, that once it's transcribed into online, you can do so much more with it. But that first process, that first transcribing and finding new resources and finding new tools, that was a little difficult with the content in that aspect. However, in my opinion, the good far outweighs the bad when it comes to online teaching. It allows us to become better educators, use more diverse means of education. We can differentiate in brand new ways, utilize the one-to-one Chromebook if you have that situation, utilize that to help students learn. And it also allows me to be more present with my students, which is something I didn't expect. I thought that it would be some distant and it would be nothing like teaching, but in a way, it allowed students to access me more than ever, right? I had no problem sending emails because I was checking it all the time, right? Remind, I never used Remind before, and that's a great tool. However, there are some times where a student would message me at like 2 in the morning, and I wake up and saying, why were you up at 2 in the morning? But it's not the point. The resources and the horizons that we can broaden with online technology is amazing, and we can only get better as we go. So thank you for listening to my screencast. Have a great day.